Good afternoon to all of you in the United States, and good evening to our speakers and guests in Europe. It is my great honor to welcome you to the online discussion entitled Echoes of European Documentary Film. We stream live from New York City. I'm the Deputy Consul General of the Czech Republic in New York. Today's discussion is part of the Echoes of the Jihlava International Documentary Film Festival in New York, an event that has taken place here in the past 4 years. This year, we only meet virtually, which makes the Echoes of Jihlava to be streamed online for the first time. Adding a positive note to that, the streaming makes the event available to even larger audience across the United States, which is fantastic. I would like to thank to all who made the event possible, especially to Jihlava International Documentary Film Festival, the largest event of its kind in Central Europe, to the platform DA Films, to our colleagues from the Austrian, Portuguese, French, and French culture institutions, Trebich Whiskey, and Czech Tourism. Special thanks goes also to our colleagues from the Czech Center in New York, also just for the simple fact that they did not give up on organizing so many interesting events, despite the limitations caused by the pandemic, including this one. This year, the Echoes of Jihlava in New York has presented 3 interesting European films from the Czech Republic, Portugal, Austria, and France. And I'm very honored to welcome you to this closing event, which is the debate with excellent filmmakers who will discuss their films featured in the festival with a special focus on American context and on how European documentaries are currently being received in the United States. It is symbolic that the discussion is moderated from Los Angeles, which brings me to introduce the moderator of the discussion. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome Summre Garber, a documentary filmmaker and film festival programmer based in LA. She was the director of operations at Fernandes, and she has been the co-captain of the documentary programming committee since 2013. She was also the senior programmer for the Bentonville Film Festival, in addition to screening and consulting for a number of other festivals, including AFI and LAFA. Allow me to give you the floor. Thank you very much and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today. So my name is Summre. I live in Los Angeles. I'm a longtime documentary film programmer and maker. I've lived in California my whole life. I have traveled to Prague and loved it, but my pronunciation is going to be terrible. So I want to just start off with that from the top so I don't offend anyone. And then let's go around in a circle, and if we can start with Adam and say your name and the film that you're with and maybe where you're located, because I think it's cool that we're kind of all over the globe right now.
Hello. So I can say a few words about me and the film. So I'm Adam Oľha. I'm from Slovakia. I live in Czech Republic, based in Prague, studied the film school there. And we've made the film Alchemical Furnace together with Jan Daniel, who cannot join us for this discussion, but he says hi. He doesn't speak so much fluent English, so he rather took this decision for me. So I'm here to answer your questions, and I will be really glad to hear something from the audience, which is maybe a little bit too much far away from me. But I hope that it's still present. So I'm here to answer your questions. I will be glad.
Perfect. Pedro, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you to the Czech Center in New York and to everyone who put the program together. I'm a film producer mostly. I do many things in films, but I've been producing most of the time now. I'm in Lisbon. I opened a company several years ago. I have this film, The Ghosts Long Way Home, in the program, directed by Tiago Sauper, who is it's a newcomer. It's a new filmmaker who has done some things in the past, but we can say this is his debut film, feature-length film, documentary film. And it's, well, we can talk a bit more about it later, but it's a very particular production process that gave origin to a very peculiar film, I think. I've also produced The Metamorphosis of Birds, which is a film that was in the Berlinale last year. It's been sold a bit everywhere in this past 12 months during the pandemic. So that's also maybe an interesting case study for us. And well, I'll be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Great. Hubert, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Hubert Sauper. I'm glad to be with you guys. I am based in Paris. I was born in Austria. I live in France for the last 30 years, I think, or 28 maybe. And I work mostly on documentaries in what is referred to the southern hemisphere, I would say. My most known film is called Darwin's Nightmare, which was quite known in the States and in the world. And my latest film is about the States. It's called Epicentro. It's the film that's in the program now. It is about the narrative and the self-representation of the United States as an empire. It's kind of the non-avoué, I don't know how to say it in English, non-admitted part of the United States, with difficulty admitted that the United States is an empire. And the fact is that the US as an empire started in one night in 1898 with one big bang in the harbor of Havana, Cuba. And that's where the film is based. That's why I have Cuban folklore in my apartment in Paris behind me. So it's called, this is Epicenter, and I think if I'm right, the people are just watching the film now or films now.
That's correct. They're available till midnight tonight, I believe, New York.
And I'm happy to be with you guys. It looks great.
It's a beautiful film. We're happy to have you here.
Yeah.
So I'm happy you guys brought in some of your past experiences too, because we're basically, for this conversation, placing these films in a US context since they're playing out of New York. So I wanted each of you to take turns, and maybe we can go in the same order we just went, talking a little bit about your US experience with these films or past films in terms of audience reception, experience you've had, distribution, otherwise. And perhaps if this film hasn't had a huge US reception or response, maybe why you chose to focus on a different audience, maybe something more local to what your story is. Just generally your experience so far with this film in the US. And Adam, you can go ahead and start.
Okay, so my experience with US festivals is very, how to say, I've been presenting my previous film in Toronto Hot Dogs Film Festival. It was taking place in 2013, I would say, yes. And it was very pleasant. I found it a little bit different from European festivals in sense of like maybe bigger audience, more films. And also I met a lot of people from Europe who actually became my friends since then. So it's good to connect through US space into your own home, friends. So this was good, and I would just like say one little story from that. When I was playing my first movie, which is called New Life of Family album in Toronto, I was quite depressed because they were showing it in the big cinema, like a huge hall, like the biggest screen I ever experienced in my life, and there were 60 people in the screening. So I found it a little bit embarrassing. I went depressed out of the cinema, walking the streets of Toronto, and there was another screening another day, which I attended, and it was quite the same. There were maybe like 100 people in this big hall, and after the film, some of guys came. They were around 60, and I said, in this film is your grandma. This grandma was teaching me in the primary school in Miava, which was the city of my mama's my mama's birthplace. So the expats who've been living in Toronto for such years were like coming to me after the screening and saying me such a personal message that it turned my US appearance as one of the best day of my life until the moment. So I just realized that miracles are happening, and even you are doing a little thing, sometimes it can meet with a great audience. And I would say that documentaries in US are also made differently, and they are like following different paths. But it was, for me, it was great experience. And with this film, Alchemical Furnace, it's actually, I think, our US premiere just right now. So hard to say. I think the times that we are watching film online brings us to the new situation that allows us to perceive films different way. And I'm not judging if it's good or bad, but let's wait for the results. I mean, the films are made for as much audience as it can approach, and I think it's just a matter of time that it will turn out that we need to share it this way, how we are doing it now. So without the cinema, of course, we would like to screen the film in the big screen, but I'm starting to think that this is also the possibility how to approach people who are interested. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to get more into that too. And another question, like with the evolving state of online film festivals and all of that, definitely some pros and cons. But it's so funny what a small world it is in your hot dog story. Pedro, you want to go next? Has this film played in the US, or what's your experience in the past with US reception?
Sure. Well, this film is also having its US premiere in this program. I think this is also a consequence of, well, the pandemic and all the COVID situation. Otherwise, maybe it would have been different. But, well, in the past, films I've produced have been in, well, if we think about festivals, they've been Art of the Real in New York, or True False, other events. But I'm really interested in thinking about how we could make these films, not which films we could make, because we should make the films we want, but how could we take them to, without having to change the films we do, how can we make them be seen by people in other places, and, well, throughout the US, for instance. And I really think it would be possible. I come from a background where, well, people in my family were not watching like the avant-garde films that were coming out at the time, and I was lucky, and I started watching them the way I could. But this to say that I believe many people would like to watch them, but they can't, sadly, because maybe they're not well promoted enough, maybe because there's not this part of the chain that takes the films to the people. It's not working the way it could be working. This other film I produced, the Metamorphosis of Birds, we had similar stories like to the ones Adam just told. With the pandemic, so many screenings have been online that people in kind of remote places have seen the film, and otherwise maybe they would not, because there's not a big festival where they live. And it's been really funny because I love the big theater, the big screen and all the experiences. And not only, it's not a matter of size, it's also like to be with other people. For me, that's actually even more important. I think for everyone probably. But it's also been funny how the virtual screen, computer screen cinema experience with the pandemic especially has made some people access the films and they would not otherwise. I was talking to people from several festivals, including in the US, and now they can track where people are geographically, and people are in remote areas sometimes, and we kind of forget that people are not only in New York or in Los Angeles or the big cities. So, well, I'm kind of optimistic. I hope I'm not being naive, but I think I can see some good things that we could do in the future from now on. But, well, overall, I can't say really the films I've produced and worked at have really been distributed in any significant way in the US, and I would love that to happen. So maybe with the four of us, we could invent some things, some paths to do that. Well, I don't know if I answered your.
Is going a long way towards that too. I definitely agree that there's a greater need for access in the US to independent European cinema than there is the actual infrastructure for that access. So I do think that's improving now with virtual film festivals, though I definitely think that that's been a trend in the right direction. Hubert, do you want to talk about your experience in the US? Have you, with this film or any previous films, advice for other filmmakers or American audiences reaching some of these films, anything like that?
I don't think I have advice for anyone. I don't even know what to do myself.
You want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, I'm kind of, I think I'm luckier than our friend that just talked. I have, all of my films have US distribution, all of them have cinema distribution, all of them are running for the Oscars. And one was shortlisted and one was nominated for an Oscar. But I'm still kind of a freak in the world of documentary in the US context. I'm kind of, I don't know how it happened that Darwin's Nightmare got nominated for an Oscar. It's just so off the chart to anything that was running against or at the same time. So the March of the Penguins won the Oscar that year. Just to give you a, I don't know if you know this film. It's like penguins who speak.
Yeah, I know the typical taste of the Oscars.
So of course, gun running, Ukrainian mafiosi in Central Africa with fish bones being eaten by local populations. That's the antithesis of penguins who are nice and monogamous and talk. So in a way, it's almost a miracle how this happened, you know. And I have like my kind of my niche. I mean, I it's kind of, despite myself, I developed a style. You know, the critics are writing about how is the style. What the style really is, that I work with such a minimalist in such a minimalist way in a logistical and technical sense, that I literally, you know, run around with tiny cameras lit by a candle sometimes in the middle of the Congo, and that's a scene in the middle of the night. You cannot reduce, you know, making cinema more than that. You know, it's like one person, one candle, and one little tiny camera, and another person being filmed. But I also make a huge effort in research, years on end. I have sometimes a big team to prepare things, to find people on the other side of the world. So and the outcome is very clearly for the American viewer, European art house cinema. And and so what's your question is, what is the audience? I think it's a dialectic between us filmmakers and the film readers or the audience, of what kind of narrative is, or what kind of cinematic language is being conveyed, and how far can you push the boundaries of kind of experimenting with narrative and form, that it is still kind of received and perceived and felt and experienced as real cinema. And at what point do you lose people? Because I mean, once the films that I guess everyone in this room here, virtual room, we make movies that are hitting a nail with art house cinema goers, and people can start cry and feel a life-changing experience, and millions of other people who go like, what kind of movie is this? That's not a movie. Who's the bad guy, who's the good guy? I was like, what's going on here? So that is the fact when a little documentary like in this case Darwin's Nightmare gets out of its family where it was meant to be received, and it's being seen by so many millions of people who cannot necessarily deal with it. And then it goes in all kinds of ways, and it's because in this case again, it was a very radical political movie. It came to the desk of heads of state of the film of Tanzania, where I shot the film. They were running a hate campaign. I got death threats. The Ukrainian mafia was on my neck. I had to spend 3 years in court to fight defamation of terrible. I mean, I had a terrible life, to be honest, because the movie left its place. Because those people saw it. In Africa, the head of state saw it as an intellectual act of terrorism against the good image of their own country. The import-export lobby of the billion-dollar business of fish, of this stupid fish from Lake Victoria, which is kind of the protagonist of my film, Nile perch, was suddenly not anymore important. It imported in Europe. I mean, not because of my movie, but because it was nominated for an Oscar, and then it just blew, its limits. So, what should I say? I was happy that many people saw a film, but millions of people probably misunderstood it and were seeing it with the prism of some kind of right-wing hate propaganda, and then said, okay, yeah, that's a film against Tanzania, that's a film against global business, it's against humanitarian aid, whatever, it was not against any of this. So what should I say? I mean, I get an audience, but sometimes more than I wished for, and people that I wasn't ready to kind of engage with.
I think that's very well said.
Yeah.
It's audience ultimately, and even if it goes out to wider people, I mean, that's a really interesting story.
Yeah. But now, can I just wrap up for Epicentro? Epicentro is my latest film. I was living in Cuba for 3 years. I'm not sure if this hat is from Cuba. I just put it on my head because I'm full of plaster. I was in a construction site today. And it is the first film I made kind of about America, about the United States. And that's of course a very delicate thing, because if you're not from the United States, and if you're hitting a nerve of a society that's already struggling with its own narrative in a very very difficult way, then it can be difficult. But I must say, I mean, the film was world premiered in Sundance. It is a radically political film. It's not a film that is romanticizing the Cuban Revolution at all, even though I have a Cuban flag here. But it's shot in Cuba because that's where the United States kind of defined itself as an empire when the US's Maine was attacked by what the US said the Spanish Empire in 1898. So it was. So I didn't know what's going to happen. I brought the film to Sundance, and I was just hoping, of course, that it's going to be read in an intelligent way, and it was, because in Sundance there's like thousands of highly educated and visually educated people, and I got the grand jury award in Sundance, and they could have chased me out of America too, you know. So I wasn't sure what's gonna happen. So I was received great, you know. I was very happy. And as we all know, just after that event, I made a New York premiere, and then in March and last year, and then the world shut down. You know, and from now on we are only two-dimensional humans, or we look like humans, but we're just a screen. You know. So I don't know if are you guys real, or are you alive? Are you there?
No,
I'm not real.
not
Or
really.
maybe you're pre-recorded clones or something.
Yeah,
Right.
How can you prove you're not a robot? You know, sorry.
I'm a clone, not a robot.
Yeah, that's great. You look good. You look like a handsome boy. So yeah, so that's what I can say now. But also I don't have like a massive audience. You know, I have it's like there's people who know all my films and read all the articles, but it's still not a wide audience. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, for documentary filmmakers, it's always, I think, a continuous struggle. When has one ever really made it?
Unless you film penguins. If you film penguins,
exactly, then a lifetime of success. I guess that leads me into the next question about everything being virtual now. I know with this festival and your experience at Ilava, it was an all online event. At the last minute, it sounds like, or fairly late in the process, they decided to do everything virtually. So can you guys talk about your experience with that, how it differed from previous festival experiences you've had? I know as an organizer this last year, I enjoyed people didn't have to pay exorbitant amounts to travel to Park City and break their banks. And we were able to include programmers and filmmakers from all around the world for different events. And I thought that was a really nice perk. But then again, you miss these moments of bumping into a random person in a hallway, finding out they're one of the coolest people you've ever met, and then they become your lifelong collaborator. Like, those things aren't happening now. But so just talk a little bit about your experience with this and any pros and cons you see happening. I'm trying to stay positive about it, but maybe you guys have a different spin. Adam, do you want to go ahead and begin?
Okay, I'll be short, because once we had international premiere in Rotterdam with this film, when I was approaching the belt of recollecting my baggage, there was a footage of the Chinese hospital building up in 10 days to save the world from COVID. And I was watching it on the screen that time, and I said, okay, something huge coming from the news channel that I see every day, some disasters, and here I go. I collect my bag in the festival. I'm safe. I go to festival and I'm watching this hospital being built in China. And here we go to 2 weeks after we've been not traveling, or 2 months after. So we were lucky. Like I need to say that we were lucky that we had some premieres. So we didn't have a Czech premiere yet in the cinema, which is maybe the most painful for every filmmaker, that you cannot show film to your friends or to people who allies with your friends, and it doesn't create the needed atmosphere for enjoying the movie itself. But in the other hand, you still have the film prizes around and film critics showing up, talking. And then you find yourself in the situation that you are being judged in a way of making some film, but no audience. And that's the very strange feeling, you know, like I can understand very well that everything can go worldwide, online and stuff like that. I think there is the future of that, and then we as a documentary filmmakers need to face it as a reality. There is no better choice for us to spread the films around the world than to hang it on internet. But still there is missing one one particle, which is the audience, that also Hubert was saying, that you get the audience that you don't want, and in the other hand you have the experience that you never had before. So you need to deal with those things, and you need to find yourself in good balance of that, finding yourself in the living room, experiencing it in the way that you normally don't do. You know, you don't get drunk in front of the kids. You don't speak to filmmakers in front of the kids. I'm now in the office and not in my home. And that's all going on, you know, and once the film is personal, it comes into the story. So all of the films that I make are kind of personal. So I'm used to one-to-one meeting with every spectator I'm getting, and no matter if it's online or if it's real, because it's always one-to-one. If you have some question from the audience, it's one-to-one. And our character from our movie, Jan Schwankmajer, who is maybe most famous around the world, but not in our home country, which is the fact. He's saying one very good thing in the film as well, like one sentence, and he's saying like, you cannot see the real like complex audience. It never comes, like it's not existing. He is actually having fight with his producer, who is producing his films over 30 years, and the producer wants him to make something special that audience will enjoy, and he's answering him the sentence, but there is no like common audience. You cannot say there is a common audience. It's always Mr. Vondracek or Mr. somebody else who perceive the film, and all the perception of the film is great and individual. So I think this time is allowing us to go deeper into this and to find your audience most properly, and that's the most precise tool to measure your audience. So I'm very curious about that, despite a lot of anger and anxious feelings that I have since the film is not in cinema. But I think this is gone already. This feeling is gone. That's it.
It's not going to be the same. I mean, and this leads into my next question, which I'll just kind of weave in now, since that's where this is heading anyway. I noticed in watching all three of these films, there's a few common themes that I noticed, but the one that really resonated with me the most are these themes of kind of time and metamorphosis that come up in each of these films. And I love that scene that you're referencing with the director and the producer. That's so classic, where the producer's like, we need to appeal to a wide audience, like water it down. And the director's like, no. I mean, that's just the classic conflict between director-producer relationships. And then also this idea that, artists will be true to their vision. And then when a spectator or viewer, picks it up, then meaning is always going to change too in those relationships. Every person interacting with art forms kind of an alchemical relationship. And it'll always be different. Each spectator will kind of view things differently. I think that's really interesting. But as we're dealing now in these times of, COVID hit, we all had to very rapidly and creatively adjust to a new way of life. It just happened kind of spontaneously and very quickly. Let's all get on Zoom. Let's figure this out. Let's come up with these creative solutions to continue working and creating art. And now we're facing vaccine rollouts, and what is this new normal going to look like? It's probably not going to look like in-person festivals again right away, or 500 seat theaters, unfortunately. But what does it look like? And those kinds of questions and ideas kept coming up for me in each of these films, because I feel like each one is kind of dealing with themes of time and metamorphosis that feels really relevant right now. So that kind of weaves into the same question that I'm asking, I guess, about transitioning now to online festivals and what this new normal looks like. But Adam, you were already drawing in like themes from your film, so I'm just going to throw that out there now too, as something I've been thinking a lot about. Okay, so Pedro, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with online, what you see the future looking like? How do we keep adjusting to all these constant changes now? And
yes, as a producer, I would like to first comment on the scene from Adam's film. I think producers that want filmmakers to do the films differently so they reach more audiences are just being lazy because they don't want to do their part of the job, which would be like to take the film to those audiences, and they want an easier way. So I honestly don't believe in changing the films. Of course, we have creative ideas about how films should be, but the criteria being make it easier for the audience doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's really a misunderstanding that producers adopt this role for themselves as people who want the films to be more easier or more simple. That's like a easy way out, but it's not gonna work either. So I think really the crucial thing is how we promote the films, honestly. About the festivals and the pandemic and the virtual world, I'm honestly not nostalgic at all from the world we had in 2019. I'm nostalgic about the world I've never seen, where there were many film theaters. I've heard about this world. I've never seen it. I have to admit that, well, if I think about this, most films that are my favorite films of all time, the classics, all the films I really love, I would say 90% of them, I watch them on a computer or on a TV. Because they're old films, they're not being screened, or they're contemporary films, but I've seen them through links or things like that. Not that I want to, I would love to watch them on the big screen, but in 2019, the reality was already that I was watching things on DVDs, 10 years ago, on DVDs and on TV. Well, the film that changed my life when I was 14 years old, I watched it on TV. It's an Manuel de Oliveira. It's like an old Portuguese filmmaker. For the people who don't know him, it's kind of demanding cinema. It was luckily I caught it on TV and
Which
changed
film?
my life. The Abraham's Valley. Do you know which one it is? From 80.
You make a Comédie de Dieu.
Yeah.
De Dieu?
That's him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well, Comédia de Deus, you mean another Portuguese filmmaker, João César Monteiro, I think, which is amazing. Yes, it's for the same generation.
Yeah.
So this to say that I wish we would change things from the way they are now, but many times in these conversations, I see people mixing these two things, the pandemic and the virtual world, and it's like this happened in the 80s. If it had happened in the 80s, the contrast would have been huge, but things were already preparing to be this way. I honestly don't like to go to film festivals and have to watch 5 films a day so that I can watch them. Otherwise, I will never have a chance again to watch them on the big screen.
You get the links, right? I
Exactly.
mean, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or I see them on some streaming platform, or I download them, and that's how people are watching many films today, in torrents. And often I have friends asking me, I tell this many times because it's true. Films, people who are not from the film scene, they ask me how can they watch a certain film because they cannot find it online, and in the end they download it and they cannot find it anywhere. But my point being, people want to watch them. People are asking me because I'm supposed to know how they are watched. I don't know more than anyone else. So it's great that festivals give attention and highlight the good films. And I hope this work of programming continues to be made and it becomes even more relevant, that programmers distinguish which films and make sense to certain audiences. Like I was saying, the role of the producer as someone who does, when the film is finished, also takes it somewhere. Then there's the programmers, the distributors, all this. I hope the role of these people keeps on developing and becoming more important. But I don't think it was good before the virus came. So I just wish we can maybe have film theaters again. That doesn't depend on COVID. That depends on gentrification of cities, the economic system. I think that's what it depends on. So sometimes it's a bit of misleading to attribute all the problems to the pandemic. That's at least how I feel it. And let me just use the opportunity to tell Hubert that I never again ate Nile perch after watching your film. So I think that's very important that you did that. I hope I'm the right audience that you wanted to have. No, it's true. I watched it on Doc Lisboa in Lisbon while the year it was there by chance. So that's a good thing of festivals. That we see things by chance and we discover things. But the model of these 10 days running around, I don't think it's I wish there were festivals all year long. Like we could just go, I think that's called film theaters with good programming. I would like that.
Yeah, I wish we'd met. I wasn't there when this.
Oh, damn it. Yeah.
But now we know each other. It's good.
Now we do. Yes.
Yeah. I see you somewhere with a beer.
Yes, it would be great.
Should I say a few things to this team?
Please go ahead. That's perfect.
Well, it kind of joins the theme of my movie, Epicentro. It is precisely about cinema, about moving images, and the irony is that film existed already when cinema was invented, because Thomas Edison invented essentially a little box where you could see a film individually, like you look into a hole and you see moving images, which is very American. It's individualism. It's me and myself see a movie. That was before the Lumiere brothers in Paris, where I'm now, invented the idea that you could actually throw it on a wall and share the experience and be on a journey together and have people shouting and standing up when the train comes at the same time, and all these amazing things that cinema does to us, the common journey, the common experience, and that is magical, and it is never going to go away. And of course, we are nostalgic now because I was in film school and I went to see Jarmusch and Wenders and Aki Kaurismäki's movies like going to church. It was like Kaurismäki made a new film, so we all went like to a holy grail or something, and that was beautiful. We were a group and we were hanging out afterwards and getting drunk and talking about the movie all night, etc. So the common experience is important, but that is also, we shouldn't forget, that was invented in Europe, but it was in 1898, which is actually, that is the story of Epicentro. 3 years after the Lumiere brother invented the idea that you could collectively see moving images, the United States and Edison and his teams understood that this is the technology of the moment, and this is the technology can literally change the world. And it did in such a crazy way that in the theory I was developing in Epicentro is that the birth of the moving images and the birth of the United States as an empire was coinciding. And it's not a coincidence. It was like that was the trigger that the United States could see itself and represent itself with this amazing power that's called soft power, and then with this amazing invention that is kind of Hollywood that projects literally a way of a narrative into the whole planet, and we shouldn't forget that very invention that the United States had in 1898 and using cinema as propaganda to rule to convey its own propaganda against the Spanish evil empire at that state. I mean, that's what the U.S. position was. That formula was also bringing down the world, kind of. That was Stalin's biggest tool, and Hitler's and Goebbels, and there's no dictator on the planet who didn't understand that TV and cinema is the thing to kind of have in hands, and so now 100 years later we kind of come back to the individual form. It's like I'm alone with my computer watching Casablanca in my bed, so that's the kind of the original form, it's like that was Edison before cinema was even invented, and it's American again, so Europeans are always a bit slower, it's interesting that all these crazy things like now the internet, of course, come from not only from the US but mostly from the West Coast, and Hollywood, and I'm even a member of the Academy, which is like the factory of the dream factory, and it's soft power. It is producing. It makes people in Afghanistan want to use a surfboard, or a skateboard, and that's perceived as progress and amazing because they see these pictures, and it's fine, but it's like it's ironic, that we are like, it's kind of going in a loop, we're back to the beginning. And the next step, I mean, of course, in every change of technology, when cinema came up, people said radio would disappear, and when photography was invented, people said nobody's going to paint anymore because photography is so much better. Of course, it coexists, So cinema will coexist, but in a different way. It's going to be less, but I hope very much that film festivals will keep existing, and even though it goes along with staying up all night and drinking too much alcohol for a lot of people, etc., but it still is an experience of an incredible intensity, to especially this kind of hub of the supernova of thinking and highly intelligent people that kind of thrown into a big party, which is extraordinary, and I miss that, of course.
Yeah, it's interesting too, this idea of analyzing our nostalgia, and really thinking about what we're nostalgic for and how far back that nostalgia goes and how real it is.
But it's gonna be. I mean, in Hislab, I was like, all of my films were in Hislab. I never had time to come, but and last year I was ready to go, and it's online, So, but I can't wait to go. But, if I'm
Travel again will be nice for sure. Okay, we have some audience questions, so I'm going to ask the first one in the chat that I see here. Your films hold a lot of cultural specificity. Have you noticed that the audience reactions differ from one country to another, not just in the US versus Europe, but maybe even within different parts of Europe or other parts of the world? Or is it that the kind of audience that will watch indie documentaries are more alike than they are different, regardless of where they are in the world? Which comes back, I think, to this theme of globalization that we kind of keep talking about within art house cinema. Maybe there's something there.
Who's
We can start with Adam again.
Okay, like in reaction to this question and all what was said before, I think that we are mostly creating the cans of something that can be preserved for the later use, which is great thing or great thing of cinema, that we really, if the audience doesn't meet the film, we need to wait for another audience. And it means also time-wise, it also means the space-wise. And as the question was asking, I think it's the right thing, because Europe is so complicated that we don't understand each other very well all around, and that's it's so unique. And I like it. I like that my film resonates somewhere in Romania differently than in Poland, and we are still speaking about Eastern like Europe. Then the West is different, and how we see each other is different, and we are living in such a short memory together that the films are just showing up the first layer. And if we do these films with a certain knowledge about what we are dealing with, it's very necessary to just be calm and to wait for the audience later on. And I think this, like, I'm from the family of the theater makers, which are dealing with such problematic things even now in COVID and in normal age as well. They sometimes always miss the audience. And this is the great honor to cinematography, that this is not happening. There are just too many films, and we need the festivals to be promoted, as Pedro said also, like we need the promotion. And if people knows about the film, and if then it's storage somewhere, doesn't matter, but somebody needs to know the title and then pick it up 20 years ago, or 20 years later. And I think this is working, and this makes me feel good. And as always, I will just tell you something from the movie that is screened now, The Alchemical Furnace, where Jan Schwankmajer was not possible to, he was not allowed to shoot for the period of 8 years in his life. Certainly the age of his greatest like development, like he was at around 50 years old, and he was not allowed to make films anymore for 8 years. So he brought himself into something totally different, to the tactile studies of art creation that he was doing at that time. And he totally forgot about the moving images, and he started to touch the the material to make a ceramics, which later on appeared in his following work in filmmaking. And he said that he was totally happy, like he was not having any trouble with that, because he just like brought something else into his hands and tried to reveal some sense of it, the human, which is not the just the side which brings you into very commercial way of thinking, because it's the side is like distorted by the overuse, and so the touch is maybe the sense that will bring the same like essence. So that was it, and he was not doubting this, and he came back into filmmaking, and suddenly his later films are full of like touch feelings that he brought from before. So, and he was also saying that the film is the shit is there, it's sealed, and it sells great if it's sealed, like it needs to be just sealed and looking well in the shelf, and that's how it should be. So we need to just find a way how to promote ourselves as a sealed film can in front of you. When you approach the regal, there should be your film written, and that's the way how to learn to see that. That's my question.
Pedro, do you have an answer for that question?
Sure. Well, it's a very interesting question, actually. So thank you for it. Art really is a mystery because I'm a bit obsessed about these different cultural differences, especially in this globalized world. And I think, well, at least what has happened to me most of the times is that we make a film, we think it is a certain thing, and especially when we show it to people who are from a different country. I wouldn't even say like from the other part of the world, just like a different culture, or even sometimes inside the same country. We through this collision between the film and the audience, we discover what we actually have done, because and we discover how we are. And I'm thinking about very precise things here. In several films I produced, the documentaries especially, I've been faced with questions by people from other cultures, especially the Anglo-Saxon world, about family that really surprised me a lot, and that allowed me to discover this cultural difference between, let's say, a more Latin approach and or Southern European approach and the more Anglo-Saxon world. We were coming out of a screening at a festival, so I'm contradicting myself here. And it was a Dutch woman. She said, "Oh, the films generally have to do with families in Portugal." I realized I didn't even realize that all the films I had produced, or most of them, had the family as a very crucial part of it. And so we were talking about families, and she said something, and I commented that my family, blah blah blah, and then I said something about my grandparents and something, and then this other Portuguese person was present and also talked about her family, and suddenly this Dutch woman said, "How come you know so much about your families?" And this because of the film. And we thought it was perfectly natural that we knew the lives of our grandparents and even before them. And she said, "No, I don't think in the Netherlands people know about so much about their families." And this stuck with me. And then because these two films, the one I have in this program, the Ghosts, and this other one I produced last year as well, they're both about families. I've been paying attention, and it's really funny how apparently in Portugal we have a model and a role for family. And I'm not talking about like heteronormative families. It's not, these families in our film are in our both films are very strange. But apparently we live the idea of family in a different way. I have a friend from New York who watched the Metamorphosis of Birds the other day, and he told me, "Oh wow, like in Portugal, grandparents and grandchildren, they talk in this way." It never occurred to me, you know. And in a time where we think everything is globalized and everything is the same, um, it is at a certain level things have become very normalized, but this kind of cultural deeper roots, like you were talking before about France versus the US, for instance, as for the theater or the little box, these things persist. So when, yes, for sure, when we show films around, I've been realizing that they're experienced in very different ways according to where we show them. And especially I discover more about ourselves, which is funny. We think we're showing something to other people, but what they give back to us really is more enlightening to us. We don't really know what we've done most of the times, I think.
That's right.
Great. Well, I mean, the world has developed thousands of languages around the world, or tens of thousands, and only one is truly universal. That is that is cinema. That is the universal language. So if Charlie Chaplin falls on a banana skin, but I mean, almost anywhere in the world can be read and understood. When I mean, what is even more universal, of course, is when cinema does not have language, because that was the case of Chaplin, and it became when sound and cinema was kind of, the sound was invented or added to the moving images, it kind of became more specific and lost its universal thing in a way. My experience is that what is most common and most like what passes everywhere and then transgresses every culture is image without words, of course, and is tragedy. So tragedy can be understood. If you see a child in Congo crying on its mother's body, everyone can understand that. When somebody tells a joke in Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, I'm sorry, it's really a bad thing to say.
It's the same.
Then it's very specific, because people in the Czech Republic laugh about specific things, different sets of associations, cultural backgrounds, etc. So tragedy is more universal than anything else that can be represented. In a weird way, I live in France, and I make mostly documentaries. And there is a school of making documentaries in France, which has a formula, which is an academic formula, which is thèse, antithèse, synthèse, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And I don't care about this concept, so I never thought about it. I don't want to adhere to it. It doesn't occur to me. I find it boring and stupid. So I don't do it. So a lot of people in certain circles in my own town in Paris get lost, because like, how did you construct this film, and why didn't you explain better, and why didn't you at the end make kind of a conclusion? And I said, like, okay, you make your conclusion. That's like you're the audience. You're not. I mean, I have to count on your intelligence, not I don't want to feed your brain like a newborn baby, So I encounter these kind of boundaries, but I also encounter a lot of situations where in Epicenter there's a scene where 10-year-old kids just start to crazily dance on a rooftop, which has happened to be my own place where I lived and worked. And my friend Una Chaplin is playing this little guitar and singing, and it's just like there's nothing to not understand. Like everyone in the world goes like, "Oh my God, this is literally paradise." And one of the kids says it. It just screams, "I'm in paradise." Out of the blue. So you probably haven't seen this. You said you saw the film 3/4, right? Anyway,
I thought that if I can say, I thought that she's amazed by the person who was like having this rooftop, that asked her to be actress and to give her a little bit more of
that's my place. And Una is the actress.
Yeah.
In real life, she's an actress. But anyway, so sometimes it's despite of us, it transgresses anything, tragedy, joy, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has to stay in its own boundaries. There's just films for intellectuals, and that just cannot be read outside of certain areas of where the codes are shared, so to say.
And that's the humor. Sorry to say, but maybe the humor is the thing that makes it more complicated, right? Because
that's what I said. That's what I
More
said.
than tragedy. Mhm.
I said tragedy is more universal than humor, and humor
But
is
that's pity, no? Like that's a real pity that the tragedy can be something more universal.
well, it's a fact. It's like if somebody dies or is killed, by a madman, everyone can understand that that is a tragedy and can read it. Somebody tells a joke in Thailand, not everyone is laughing.
Humor within cultural differences is much harder.
Yeah,
But maybe
more specific than tragedy. That's what I want.
in a future where everyone will be very happy, maybe they won't have the concept of tragedy and they'll be very confused about what we're talking about. We're not there, but
You read Huxley.
Yes, yes.
But I think
Absolutely.
Portugal is really good doing it well, that the tragedy and the humor comes together in João César Monteiro, for example.
Well, tragedy for us, and again, back to the cultural differences and specificities, tragedy, I would not say tragedy in the same sense that you were talking about before, but well, the sadness and this nostalgia, it's like a sport here. So we're very used to it, so it becomes kind of funny. But again, it's a very specific thing. But surprisingly, when it goes abroad, people get it, and this is the thing that has amazed me the most: is things that I really thought would not be shared or shareable. People understand them. The reaction is, oh, I had never thought about that before. But often it is not, I don't get it. And I didn't expect that. I expected to be, I don't understand. But it is not. It's people are sometimes, like I am, amazed at things we didn't know. But I agree with what you guys said before as well.
Can I ask you a question? Why is in Portugal the saudade a national cult?
Well, maybe
why not in other countries? I mean, what is that the end of the empire, or was it?
Yeah, for sure. I think it would need maybe a history class, but the fast answer, my theory is that yes, it's a bit like Russia, big empire collapsed, but with the fact that we are very small. We have been in a crisis since the 1700s, basically. There was never like a happy times or like a consistently economically stable moment. So I think people got used to it. And we don't know any other thing. That's what we know. So people are very like a bit sad, but it becomes something else. It's like longing for the things you never had actually. But then if you lose that, if you're suddenly happy, you don't know how to deal with it. So that's when you really become sad. So we keep on this borderline. And again, you're right. It's tragedy. Everyone understands it. Everyone understands what I'm saying. But still, I think we understand what is shared. So if in a very future from now we have a society that maybe is not as doesn't have the same problems we have today, I'm talking about a different civilization, but just like to theoretically, just thinking about the potentiality of human beings, we would not have to be in this tragedy as the shared element. I believe we could share other things. The example you gave about Chaplin and the banana, well, you only understand it if you know what a banana is. I agree with you, but at the same time, we need to share something. Maybe we can share other things, happiness or other cultural grid. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying here is interesting too. In the beginning, you were mentioning being pleasantly surprised when you engage people versus spoon feeding what you want people to be thinking. My experience too has been that spectators generally will rise to the occasion and make that effort. And then to wrap this up too, I just want to say about Epicentro, one thing that really struck me is the joyousness of that scene on the roof versus that brief moment with the photographer who is he American? He says somebody asked him for money, but it's a privilege for them to be photographed by him. Is he? That moment stood in such stark contrast to the rest of the film for me, because there's so many moments between you and the subjects that are so symbiotic, it feels like. And for this guy to be saying what he's saying, is he American? Was that an American accent? I guess I was
Sure,
just...
he's American. He's from New York. He says that, and he says,
Oh yeah, okay.
He's so. I mean, why the scene is so crazy is not that he says like he's proud of himself. Is like these little Cubans should be happy that I take pictures of them. They should be honored, you know. But
yeah.
he says that why it probably stuck into in your soul is that at the same time he has this kind of pseudo humanitarian discourse. You know, oh, they're poor, we should help them. But well, you know, they're poor, but they don't even know they're poor. This whole bullshit, you know, it's like
white savior or something.
The good people discourse, you know. So inside of almost the same phrase, it's like they should be honored that I take a picture of them. You know? So it's like he's the extractionist in person and in action. You know, I was just so happy to film the scene, and it was so sad also because I was essentially an ethnographic filmmaker in that moment, and I was following a human being interacting with people from a very different culture, and in a very you know, disturbing way. But it's disturbing also because we know these kind of stories. We know that the Europeans went to Africa and threw, you know, candies into crowds of children, you know. We know this narrative, and it's just so painful. It's so dark.
It's a really powerful moment.
And yeah, that's why it stuck to you. But I know there's a lot of scenes in Epicenter who have a similar tone that are kind of on the surface, you know, nice, but
observational,
somehow dark. It's like this beautiful old man who's 90 years old. He's pitch dark, and he talks about the sugar factory and that Coca-Cola used to get his sugar from here, and he insists like 7 times that it's white sugar, white sugar. How great is white sugar? And that he's obviously an offspring of slaves who died for this, you know, white sugar. So there's a lot of dark things in film, but it is compared to my other films in Africa, it's a very joyful.
It's a joyous film, yeah.
I mean, most people haven't seen my first film in Africa. It's called Kisangani Diary. I mean, no one I know in this world has. Everyone who sees this film, it's shot in the midst of a genocide in the Congo, and it obviously cost almost my life and my mental kind of equilibrium, and but there, compared to that, Darwin's Nightmare is a musical, it's a comédie musicale, you know. Is a joyful way. But so for some reason I keep making very political films, but they become more and more joyful and funny in a way. So
personal, maybe.
I'm very happy about that. So because I couldn't keep going. I mean, there's no way I could go and film another genocide in this world. That's so boring.
Actually, that leads in very nicely to the last question from the group chat too, and a typical last Q&A question. What are you guys working on now, if not genocide? What are your next projects? And back to this theme throughout, we've been talking about how have you been impacted by COVID? Are all of your talking head interviews taking place over Zoom? What challenges are you facing? Etc. Can Adam go ahead and talk about maybe what you're working on now?
Yeah, so working on now is very difficult question because it can be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years of work. So for the moment, I'm working on my own projects, which is like more personal stuff. I'm trying to find a way about differences between West and East of Europe. And as I have an Italian wife and we live in Eastern Europe, I'm like collecting the data for capture like how different we are, how the world is different in United Europe, and how we are dealing with that. So this is true personal story driven film, which I would like not to be so much personal. So this is the first project about the differences, and hopefully interesting also for US audience in a way, because it's dealing with the same stuff. I think that the world is still divided and we are still not the generation that can deal perfectly with certain things. And another things are like I'm doing myself cinematography for the documentary, so I'm shooting the France films, and then I'm searching for the materials of another like documentary about the music composer Karel Ančerl, who was like leader of Czech Philharmonic at the at the at the very age of 50s, 60s, when the Czech Philharmonic peaked the top of worldwide fame, and he left to Toronto to make his career over abroad. So this is the story that is leading me to find a way how to create a movie about it. And that's the question that I don't want to make it as a classical portrait documentary. I would like to find a way how to make it in the film. Well, there are many projects, but I think we never know what will comes tomorrow, and I'm open to whatever kind of continuation. But I think this takes time. So 5 years, I will say the same answer to this question, I think.
Sometimes it's watering a couple seeds until you can see which one grows at what rate, et cetera. You know, that kind of thing too. Pedro, what are you working on now?
Well, it was just announced today that the film we're finishing is going to premiere at the Vision du Réel Film Festival in the competition of the medium-length films. And we're just finishing the post-production. And again, it's a film that I realize now that, well, I choose to produce films that I like instinctively. And it seems that there's, after some films, there's a pattern and there's common themes on between them. And in this case, like we were talking about this universality of cinema, but also how European documentary is perceived in the US. Sometimes we are watching things from very far away. Well, in America, people looking to Europe and very different cultures. But in this film, it's funny because we shot just 30 minutes or, well, 1 hour from where we live in Lisbon, into the countryside. And we get a completely different reality. It's not just about going to the countryside. It's about going to, well, old villages. It's a region with a very particular history. It's a very political region because it was, well, most of the society there were peasants for centuries. And in the 20th century, well, Portugal had a dictatorship, a far-right fascist dictatorship, and then we had a revolution in 74. And at the time, this region has always been very left-wing, so to say, well, far left. And this comes from the fact that it was peasants mostly, and then they organized and there was communities. It's not like that anymore, but all this to say, it's such a rich world. It has its own musical genre that is completely, it's beautiful. People live with a different connection to the land, because this is a very remote, like, it's not a mountain, but sort of a mountain range, that even though it's just 1 hour for here, it becomes very isolated to go from one village to the other. And just because of this geography, people were given land, because otherwise nobody would live there. And it's kind of this alternative world that was preserved there. And it's just 1 hour from here. So I think cinema allows also for this. So when I hear people say, let's make it easier so that people understand it, let's make it more accessible, or let's shape it in a certain way, I really don't think, I understand it, of course, but I really think that cinema can give us what we actually don't understand, and what we don't know. And maybe in the last century of cinema, we were going in this direction of going really far away, seeing really exotic things somewhere, or discovering the other, because there was no globalization. But now that we have this globalization, we can just use cinema to discover what's around the corner. And it's so different. So it was surprising. The film is going to premiere now in the festival. So I hope it travels and that people can watch it. The director is called Monica Martins Nunes. It's a newcomer, a woman filmmaker. So yeah, I'm very happy with that film.
That's very exciting, and ties in, I think, to this Portuguese theme you were mentioning earlier of kind of generational history, being in touch with, which I think,
for sure,
American, I don't. This sounds very foreign to me, but nonetheless. Okay, Hubert, what are you working on now?
I mean, I told you earlier that I make radical political movies, and I spent years in fighting people who wanted my skin, qui voulaient ma peau. So I don't really talk about my films in advance, because that can compromise my work. But I can just tell you a little bit more on why. I mean, I had to, when I after Darwin's Nightmare, I had to work literally under a pseudonym with a different passport in Central Africa, because it was too dangerous to travel around with my name. So I can't tell you.
Then you get a pass. You don't have to answer that question.
No, the answer is I can't. I have no answer.
That's
But
fair.
I also want to give you some
background on why not. That's
some idea why, So it's not that I'm like I don't want to talk about it, because I actually do want to talk about it, because and I do talk about it in my environment, not publicly, because it is a highly important thing to formulate ideas in order to hear yourself advance those ideas, and also to write. It's like a lot of people when I go to film schools, students say, how do you write scenario scripts for a documentary, because you never know what's going to happen. So you have to write a script. You have to write scenes that might happen, that you have seen somewhere before, that you might be able to film. You have to write and formulate your ideas. And that's why I like to talk. It's kind of a frustrating thing. I would like to talk about my new film here now, but I don't want to. I don't want this to be on the World Wide Web before I start to work. So
completely fair.
So
I think that's interesting too, is the writing. There's so many interesting threads that have come up today.
Yeah, right. I mean, writing is important, and it's very frustrating, because you don't want to write. It's just like, let me just go to the other side of the world with a camera and hang out and film. But that's not filmmaking. That's holiday making. Filmmaking is having a concept, having ideas, debating the ideas, contradicting them, finding different angles of attack, finding your own motivation, finding out why you're driven or not by this and this idea, and kind of light a fire in your own soul about something, or someone, or some new place or new story.
what your intentions are in making this film, right?
And, yeah, and I mean, it is. I mean, there's no other profession in this world that that gives you so much potential access to humans. No other profession. Because you literally enter people's lives in a very intense way as a documentary filmmaker, and you're invited in because most humans are eager to share their stories, and they are eager to be seen and to communicate with unknown people, because they will never meet most of the people that are going to see their, like I'm not meeting people watching me now either, but I still communicate into the world because that's what humans do. We share, we communicate. So it is the most amazing thing to make nonfiction films. I don't like the word documentary so much, by the way.
I agree, especially now in this time of hybridity, documentary.
No, I mean, it's also because it's like has this ugly connotation of document, of protocol.
Going back to what we were talking about, filmmaker subject relationship can be so much more complicated. It's not
Parisians are
Parisians camera and shooting somebody. It's not like that. Like
the Parisians are still are traumatized from 70 years ago when Paris was de facto colonized by Nazis, and a word that kept falling was papiere or documente, that the Nazis would say to the French population, and then you go like, shit, documente. so it's a trauma, and filling out forms, by the way, is one of my traumas.
How can you get film financing in Europe without filling documents? That's my life now. Just making documents. It's horrible.
Well, you're a producer, but it's amazing that you say that, because that is what most creative people cannot do. But you're a creative producer, as I understand.
Yeah, well, but the directors have to do it nowadays as well, which I think is a pity.
No, I mean, you have to fill out forms for this talk. I mean, I have to kind of sign up in at the Islava website to say, what I mean. I'm sorry, it's like it's an example, but it's like, I mean, I give a masterclass talk in any university in the world, which I'm happy to do. I get a bit of money, but then I have to fill out, forms and sheets and receipts, and I have to sign in and sign out, and it's just a fucking nightmare.
Change your password and blah blah blah. Yeah.
It's like and date of birth, and it's like where do I live and why do what the fuck?
This is a very universal problem.
Anyway, so documentary is a problematic term, and it's like but it's like that's what kind of we agreed on. It's like it's like it's everywhere, but I prefer to say cinema and or non-fiction cinema. And it's not like Herzog says there is no fiction or non-fiction, but because he makes fiction of everything. But I mean, I like Werner. It's not a criticism, but it's in my view there is a clear distinction. It's like if somebody in my film says I'm a pilot from Ukraine, I transport guns from Europe to Africa, it's not an actor. It's just his name is Sergei. He really does that, and he really is a pilot. That's it. There's no debate about that. And what he says is the truth. I mean, that I cannot necessarily always prove as a document, because if somebody says that's a whole interesting debate. If somebody says I am from Goma, Congo, I have 7 children, 4 have died from HIV/AIDS. My wife is also very sick. If that somebody says that on camera, that can be a lie, because maybe he only had 3 children and only 1 died from HIV/AIDS. But nonetheless, it is a true document, because this person truly said that, even if it was a lie. So because you cannot you cannot be asking this person before releasing the film 7 medical documents in the middle of a civil war to be sure that what you just said or she is true. So that's the whole debate about truth is of course very complicated.
And not only about truth, but sorry to interrupt, but all the things that we can't stage in a fiction, even if we tried to stage them.
All right. Yeah.
Documentary, whatever word we call it, has that, no?
Yeah. But it's like nonfiction film is very clearly an interpretation of the world. It's like it's not this is how Africa is. It's like this is how Hubert sees Africa in that very moment. So it's not staged, but it is radically interpreted, and that's it. It's called cinema d'auteur. There is no, and it's often misunderstood because documentaries in the TV world for half a century was essentially a colonial phenomenon. That the BBC went to Bangladesh and said, "This is Bangladesh, a little country near the Indian Ocean," and then they have a map and a document. It's documenting everything, and usually these films, these documentary films, were usually simultaneously saying what they were showing. Also, so it makes you kind of stupid. It's like this is a baby from Bangladesh. As you see a baby, this is the police coming. Okay, as you see the police coming. So this double overkill in feeding people's brains means that it makes the audience literally, it takes them as fools, and it creates fools in a way because it's like if you keep saying what you see, I keep telling the audience how they should see it, how they should feel now,
how to feel about it.
Then when you make documentaries of more free interpretation of the world, it's like, where's the explanation? Where are the figures? Where are the maps? I don't know where we are. So that's a problem. Anyway, I prefer nonfiction, and I'm not going to tell you about the next.
Don't. Fine. Okay, I really enjoyed speaking with all of you today. Thank you so much for attending. I think we can wrap it up now. This was really fun. I really feel like I learned a lot of things that I'll be pondering for a while. And I really, really enjoyed all of your films.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you two guys.
Nice to meet you.
Hope to see you in the person.
Let's meet in Islava with a beer.
Rotterdam sometime.
What?
There.
Yeah, we were talking about Rotterdam earlier too.
Yeah.
All right, have a great day. Thank you guys so much.
Do we all have each other's contacts? Yeah, I guess we do.